Mr. Adesina. Mr. Adesina. Please, may we please rise for the procession, please. Leading the procession is the acting registrar, Mrs. T.F. Okolaole, followed by the bossa, Mr. Jerry Mamojunodu, the acting rector, Mr. Olumide Olushola Metilelu, and the inaugural lecturer himself, Architect Prince Ajibade Adeyemo. The national anthem, please. The Polytechnic anthem.
Education and dexterity needs Protect is excellence. Excellence is God's protect. God's protect. Nobody can keep As is such a burning passion for skills and the God of me. Rather than facilities and potential, there is a point. Now we shall stand as a list of excellence and integrity. Protect my last, protect is excellent. Excellence is last, protect, last, protect, last, protect. Nobody can be always.
Thank you. Will you take us? I want to specially welcome members of the Academic Board of the Polytechnic, management, members of the Executive Management Committee, chief lecturers, and the great Lasposian. You are all welcome. In our midst today, we're lucky to have with us the chairman of the Polytechnic Governing Council, Professor Abdul Rashid Kola Ojikutu. You are welcome, sir. I know some of you may be seeing for the first time. That's the chairman of the Polytechnic Governing Council. You are welcome, Prof. We also have with us here today a former registrar, currently on sabbatical at Yabate, Mrs. Aderonka Ige. You are welcome. I also want to welcome some of our guests here. This is Lydia Olorunfemi, a sister to the inaugural lecturer today. You are welcome, ma. Thank you, ma. Mrs. Adenike Adefioye, Mrs. Tayo Udo, you are welcome. Architect Dr. Kunle Ogunaike from Yabate, currently with us on sabbatical leave here. Thank you, sir. Mr. Joel Olatoke, where are you, sir? Thank you, sir. We also have in our midst the spouse, Barrister Eniola Adeyemo. Where are you seated, ma?
Press anything.
Oh, thank you, ma. You're welcome, ma. Thank you for being the pillar.
Mr. Derek, can you go back to that, please? What does this mean?
I also want to welcome Pastor Godwin Samuel.
It does not really count.
Pastors, thank you, sir. Also, Assistant Pastor Olaoye BC.
What's the name of the skill?
Where are you, sir? Thank you, sir.
What's the name of the channel?
Mr. Adeju Yokun
What's
Isaac
the name?
and Mr. Peter Gwazi. These are special guests of the inaugural lecture. Thank you all. You are welcome. As soon as we have others, we will let you know. But to waste our time, I want to call on the acting rector for his welcome address. The acting rector, sir.
The moderator of the Polytechnic, absentia, Mr. Governor, Mr. Babajide Olushola Sanwo-Olu, Special Advisor, His Excellency on Education, Mr. Tokunbo Wahab, in absentia, the Chairman of the Governing Council, Professor Rashid Ujikutu. You're welcome, sir. And other members of the Governing Council here present, members of the Academic Board, members of management, deans and directors of schools, gentlemen of the press, great Lasposian, and the greatest Lasposian, ever dynamic Lasposian, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed another historic day in the history and life of this great polytechnic. Let me inform you that our brand new rector is expected to be at this event, Dr. Oluremi Nuruddin Olaleye. But he has requested that I should appeal to you that in view of the fact that he has to be making preparation for his assumption in office, that he will not be able to join us today. He has not done it out of arrogance or no disrespect for this special gathering. Please, I want to appeal to you to accept his apology. It is important to note that the inaugural lecture for today is the 28th inaugural lecture. Architect Ajibade Adeyemo, a chief lecturer in architecture, will be delivering today's 28th inaugural lecture. And the title of today's inaugural lecture is Sustaining the Future Through a Rejected Cornerstone, a Semiotic Yoruba Architecture Approach. I have no doubt in my mind that this distinguished academic will deliver his lecture today, and at the end of the day, we will have been able to have learned one thing or the other. And he will also have made his own contribution into this area of interest. Permit me also to use today to express my appreciation for the support I've enjoyed from members of the Polytechnic community in the last 6 months. The little that we have done wouldn't have been possible without the support of every one of you here and those who are not here. On this note, please accept my appreciation for your support. I want to say thank you very much. In the course of carrying out my assignment, and in view of the nature of the responsibility bestowed upon me in the last 6 months, there is no how we will not disagree to agree. There is no how I will not have stepped on people's toes. This is obviously not intentional or deliberate, but it is all in an effort to ensure that the assignment and responsibility given to us are carried out. However, I want to appeal to you that the cooperation that I have enjoyed from you, I want to appeal for a greater cooperation to my colleague, to my friend, and to our new rector, so that we will be able to move this polytechnic higher than where it is currently being positioned. I have no doubt in my mind that it's going to be a new dawn for the polytechnic. It's going to be another new beginning for the polytechnic. And I have no doubt that with the collective commitment of every one of us, we'll continue to ensure that this polytechnic takes its rightful position in the League of Academics. On this note, without wasting too much of our time, let me also appreciate other invited guests who are here to grace this occasion. Allow me to also single out an individual here. Everybody is very important.
12 viewers. Now, what
The
does this mean?
lecturer of last week public lecture, who did very well, and we also benefited from him, a former commissioner for transportation in Lagos State, and currently Dean School of Management and Business Studies, if I get that correct, at the University of Obanjo University, Professor Abiono Delebadijo. On this note, I want to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the acting rector. I'm sure Architect Adeyemo is already itching to talk. But before we call on you, I will call on the acting registrar, Mrs. TFO Kolawole, for the citation of the inaugural lecturer.
On the already established protocol. May I humbly request the 28th inaugural lecturer of today, Architect Ajibade Adeyemo, to stand up and remain standing while I do the citation. Architect Timothy Adedayo Ajibade Adeyemo was born on the 23rd April 1962 into the family of late Mr. Joshua Adegoke Adeyemo and late Mrs. Deborah Morenike Adeyemo of Ile-Ife, Osun State. He attended St. Peter's Anglican Primary School, Ile-Ife, for his primary education between 1966 and 1972. Between 1973 and 1977, he attended St. John's Grammar School, Ile-Ife, and completed same at the local government remedial school, Ile-Ife, between 1977 and 1978, where he obtained his O-level. Architect Ajibade Adeyemo gained admission into the University of Ile-Ife, now Obafemi University, Ile-Ife, to read the Bachelor of Science honorary degree in architecture in 1978, and he graduated in July 1984. He proceeded for a Master of Science degree in architecture at the same university and graduated in 1987. Architect Adeyemo began his career with the Internal Audit Department of that same university as an account clerk between 1978 and 1979. He joined the defunct National Bank of Nigeria Limited, Ibadan, as property valuation officer in 1980. Between 1981 and 1982, he was an industrial trainee with Tunji Olubesan Associates, a firm of architects. Between 1983 and 1995, he was a research assistant, Environmental Development Design and Research Institute of the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. He was pioneer head of unit, architect and planner, physical planning unit of the Ogun State College of Education between 1987 and 1988. He was architect stroke maintenance officer at the Federal College of Education, Abeokuta, Ogun State between 1989 and 1991, and between 1991 and 1999, Architect Ajibade Adeyemo was technical associate with Sabaji Construction Company, Nigeria. He thereafter joined the services of the Lagos State Polytechnic on 29 June 1999 as a lecturer 2, and he rose through the ranks to the position of chief lecturer on 13 January 2015. Architect Ajibade Adeyemo has held various positions of responsibility in the Polytechnic, among which are Dean School of Environmental Studies 2017 to date. He was acting head of Department Architecture in 2004, 2005, and 2014. He was a member, Committee on the Foundation of National Building Act, a member, Lagos State Polytechnic Journal Committee, a member, Lagos State Polytechnic Research and Development Committee, He was Chairman Research and Development Committee of the School of Environmental Studies, Chairman Publication Committee on the Built Environment, a journal of the School of Environmental Studies. He was a member, he is a member, Nigerian Institute of Architects, Standing Committee, Annual Biennial Conferences. He was Secretary, Nigerian Institute of Architects, Standing Committee on the Nigerian Housing, Building and Fire Acts, Chairman, Local Organizing Committee of the first National Conference and the proposed second National Conference of the School of Environmental Studies. He was Vice Chairman, Laspote Guest House Governing Board Committee. He is a member of various professional bodies, among which are Association of Architectural Educators in Nigeria, Architects Registration Council of Nigeria, Nigeria Institute of Architects, Nigeria Institute of Landscape Horticulturists, Nigeria Institute of Quantity Surveyors, International Network for Traditional Building Architecture and Urbanism, International Federation of Housing and Planning, and African Network of Scientific and Technological Institutions. Architect Ajibade Adeyemo is a teacher. He is an author and he has several publications to his name. He is happily married to Barrister Eniola Olajumoke Adeyemo, and the marriage is blessed. I hereby present to you Architect Ajibade Adeyemo.
We may all please be seated.
This one is delayed.
It's delayed.
The chairman of this occasion, the acting rector, chairman, governing council, and I'm greatly delighted also to mention, as the acting rector had mentioned earlier on, our newly appointed rector in person of me, Dr. Nuruddin Oluremi Olaleye. Other principal officers of the Polytechnic, colleagues, deans of schools and directors, staff and students, distinguished guests, my lord, spiritual and temporal, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great delight that I welcome you all to the 28th inaugural lecture and the first in the Department of Architecture of our Polytechnic of Excellence, titled Sustaining the Future Through the Rejected Cornerstone, a Semiotic Approach to Yoruba Architecture. This is dedicated to very many of my friends, since militant, living, and triumphant, especially Architect Mrs. Oluwa Mijuwuralo Amaonidundu, Architect Professor Ralph Minisisteti, Mrs. Ibishola Adebule, and Barrister Gbenga Ajibola, all deceased, and to the very many people who promote Afrocentricity and African architecture. Mr. Rector, sir, I'm profoundly grateful for the opportunity of presenting this lecture, which is essentially traces of my mental consciousness from infancy to how God charted my path of specialization onto architectural semiotics. God brought order and form from formlessness, in part through assigning the dressing of Eden at creation to man as the earliest architectural practice. The theories of Genesis and rudiments of architecture considered the exposure to hard weather as what prompted the need for shelter, which started basically with 4 sticks, beam connected together to form a hut. Architecture is both functional and symbolic, with the cave, the covered and open courtyards, and human body analogy as its generative concepts. Architectural built forms actually were text and composed signifiers and symbols which show the culture of its builders before the invention of the print media. African architecture here is represented by the architecture of the southwest Nigerian Yoruba people, and it is essentially in the line with what Mazuri and Hele called the triple heritage of architecture: indigenous, Islamic, and Western. Most of us dress there. You will see traces of English dressing. Some might be here with Jalamia and the like. And that is the purpose of my dressing this way, to talk of the indigenous aspect of African architecture. Heritage Yoruba architectural built forms are abandoned, flagrantly demolished, making it an endangered built form, simply because people don't have proper understanding of appreciating the meaning and the sustainable features. In fact, I refer to them as dying, beautiful parts of our bodies. The problem is essentially the fact of demonization and collective reduction of our traditional institutions and culture, especially those related to religion and architecture. New socio-economic values now promote nuclear family against the age-long extended, united, communal family living. And this has led to the loss of corporate and individual self-worth. The thrust of this presentation is the hypothesis that the indigenous aspect of African architecture as a reject has the potentiality of a cornerstone through which an enhanced built environment and society can be achieved and sustained. The beginnings. I recall with nostalgia my late grandfather, Prince David Adesokan Adeyemo, being given what seemed to my toddler mind at about age 3 in 1965, a state burial by the late Sir Adesoji Aderemi, his younger brother, the only of them, Black African governor. Closely related to this was my first consciousness of God in 1966 through this hymn, "O worship the King." Ológo jùlọ, ẹ kọrin ipa àti ìfẹ́ rẹ̀, alábò wa ní àtẹ́ni ìgbàanì, òǹgbẹ́nu ògo ẹ̀ lẹ́rù níyìn. This was at a Thanksgiving service at St. John's Catholic Primary School, which secondary school I eventually attended between 1973 and 1977. And essentially, all this is to bring about my earliest intellectual development. At age 3, don't underestimate little children, please. What people know and what can come out of them. My being a built environment professional started from being a balanced arts and science student, and with my love for geography in secondary school. I was taught then by Mr. Shende Akimbo alias Wadi. Some of my classmates are here. Initial interest in medicine as a juvenile rheumatoid arthritis patient was dissuaded by my exposure to smells of drug and chemicals in the biochemistry department of Ife. My brother, Mr. Adedokun Adeyemo, I'm sure will be here anytime. And subsequently, his younger brother, also a biochemist, Mr. Adeniji Adeyemo. I also had my octogenarian brother-in-law, Engineer Shegun Adedeji, and my sister, Mr. Adebola Adedeji, all guiding me somehow into architecture. Such that by the time, like was read, I was an audit clerk and called young accountant. It was never enough to dissuade me from being an architect. The opportunity of being an architect came to me in 1979 as a second-year student, when the then Department of Estate Management was expanded to become the Department of Environmental Development and Management, with architecture, urban and regional planning, estate management, quantity surveying, and building. So I was part of the first 3 sets, the pioneer set. And we had serious exposure to documentation of traditional buildings in Ile-Ife. My mentor in academics, Professor Steve Adewuse, a chemist, and my sister, Barrister Mrs. Adenike Adeyemo, all enabled me to become good research writer as against the typical report writing and drawing of architects. Upon graduation and national service at the then Ogun State College of Education, I had brief stint in institution maintenance at the Federal College of Education, Abeokuta, until 1999 when I was employed into this great Polytechnic of Excellence by the then Engineer Olaomi Gaspar.
Okay.
Through the encouragement of my wife and Mr. Oluwole Oragbade, I became the chairman of School of Environmental Studies Journal and Research Committee. Mrs. Ogundele was the director dean. Later became the deputy director. We organized the first national conference under late Mr. Ogunjobi. Subsequently, the second one under Mr. Adeleyema Konju. And we were able, as the chairman, to produce the Built Environment Journal of the school. I was privileged to move the department into Ikorodu when Mr. Bashir Odushola was the director. And as the head of the department of architecture, I was part of the in-house consultants who renovated the then abandoned School of Environmental Studies, a great restoration and preservation work and fundamental future of African and sustainable architecture. And we delivered the auditorium and two of the blocks has been the most effective of all the other ones, thanks to my good friend, Quantity Surveyor, Mr. Chike Nemo, who was once a member of staff here. Mr. Rector, sir, I have taught traditional architecture variously among other courses. I also always made teaching of most of my courses Afrocentric to evolve originality and self-belief in my students. My inspiration came from my exposure to the late architect Dr. Tunji Olugbeson's practice and writings, essentially his environmental link journal, which emphasized then the militarized culture and leading to loss of self-faith, insatiable taste for foreign things, to the detriment of our economic and environmental development. Against pivotal to what I now stand for, and this lecture portends, was my exposure when I allowed Mrs. Youth Copper then, late Mrs. Amao Onidundu, Ni Adedeji. It was together with her, with the permission and sponsorship of the then rector, Mr. Ayodeji Eginla, that we proposed and carried out a case study tour of Ijebu-Ode and Epe. The tour was conducted alongside architect Mrs. Yemisi Awoniyi and her father, Dr. Shonubi, a chief lecturer in tourism at Federal Polytechnic. The tour exposed the inexhaustible rich traditional vernacular and contemporary architectural brick form and spaces in Ijebu-Ode. Standing in the case study was the Ijebu-Ode Ṣùgbọ́n Eredo's 100-mile-long wall and moat, said to be earlier discovered by Patrick Darling in 1999, according to the BBC. The moat encircled about 400 square miles of the ancient Ijebu kingdom. The rampart from the beach was up to 23.3 meters, implying that the builders shifted 3.5 million meter cube of earth to build the rampart, called by Maja Kodumi the largest city in the ancient world. Literature showed that the construction art quantity of the rampart about 1 million meter cube, much more than about 1 million person hours than was used to build the Great Gaza Egypt pyramid. There's also been day-to-day exposure since my childhood to porch pavement as the oldest sustained art landscape road alloy relics in Ife Palace, along most of the walking route of the first ever Ife female monarch, or Niluwo, in the 9th century. Partial pavement has been found in at least 33 other locations along the old Yoruba migratory route as far as Noche in Togo, and has been used to classify the 3 eras of the Great Ife civilization. Portshed has among its great importance the community, health, and spiritual uses. There has been continuous research interest in Portshed, reported to be an historical architectural maintainable material. In my paper in 2014, it was called the original architectural phenomenon by Ogundino in 2000, or better still, a built form element according to a focus group discussion in the University of Lagos. My Afrocentric traditional best practice and curriculum involving skill qualification framework for your youth employment was presented in 2014 Commonwealth Association conference at the instance of the then rector, Dr. Abdulaziz Lawal. Was also instrumental to my appointment as chief lecturer in 2015, enabling me to be able to stand in front of you here. Mr. Samuel Soglo, the immediate past rector, approved this inaugural lecture meant to have been delivered last year. So many other things he did. I also want to thank you, sir, Mr. Acting Rector, for enabling me to stand before this august body today, and I heartily congratulate the entire community for the appointment of our new rector. Further exposure to things like Maria Mons, and about 30 years ago, I had a quest to know the Yoruba meaning of an architect, and I came by someone somewhere who used this profound Yoruba word. Akole inu kan kò lè gbọ́n títí kò kọ̀tà gbọ́n. No matter how wise a design builder can be, he cannot design and build a wasp's net. Further exposures from what has been read about me to International Network for Traditional Building and Architecture and Urbanism, Form, Fit and Form, and various other organizations, mostly international and non-local. And importantly again, the dogged promotion of Afrocentric visual and performing arts in the Oshobo School by late Ulibia and Susan Wenger, which enabled the making of the Oshobo Group a UNESCO heritage site, all contributed to my interest in Afrocentric architecture. Mr. Rector, sir, my conviction always look inward for sustainable development, and this has helped my push for an architecture that will be much Afrocentric in teaching and practice. This lecture focuses on beaming light on the relegation of the indigenous aspect of African architecture, and it recommends how local stakeholders can turn the situation around. As such, this requires much insight into the topic for clarity. To actually achieve this, I have broken this down into now protocols, no, shortly before that, protocols, before it, protocols and introduction, insight into the beginnings which I've done, African architecture and semiotic concepts, looking inwards, local lexicons, sustainability and other best practices, then architectural education and contributions, collaborations, conclusions, recommendations, African architecture. African architecture is seen in the context of the southwest Nigerian geopolitical zone. The predominantly Yoruba people with barely surviving monumental built forms have rich but endangered Yoruba language with which they communicate meanings. In the vein of the semiotic principles, Yoruba people are known to be rich in both verbal and non-verbal symbolic modes of communication. I'm sure the word aroko will not be unfamiliar to people who are older and are sitting here. Aroko was such that something will be made symbolically and it will be sent to a far distant place. And people in that particular culture, through what is called mutual beliefs, people will understand what that means. In the same way we have our traditional tongue criers. Architecture equally uses spaces like language to dictate and express the living styles of people. It's architecture that is making me stand here, making him sit there, distinguishing and zoning things to bring and equally bringing out the culture of the people. Like I've mentioned earlier, the triple heritage of the African architecture includes the indigenous, the Islamic, and the Western, which include Christian. The indigenous consist on the timeline and what is largely obtained before foreign influences came to us. They are mostly gone. We hardly will find them, save, like I said, the portrait pavement. Architects themselves don't even appreciate it. That is the Olumoro. You see some housing, some rooms there that were used as refugee war places during the war in those times. It is under this category that we have the traditional architecture, which comprises of folk-built forms that emphasize the process by which tradition are non-verbally expressed. Traditional architecture consists of domestic buildings constructed from locally abundant materials, which suits the study areas, hot, humid, rainforests, and sociocultural demands. The forms are sparingly found any longer, both in horizontal and vertical concept, except in things like Orua. Many of us will not understand this. Maybe we'll see it later as I'll try and illustrate. Orua or Dede or Ode. This was the family lobby then. We have small windows, the roof loft called Aja, Agorodi called goat gates. Don't let us, of course, be fooled. People believe that it was being bush people that made people to have people buried in their houses. I subsequently discovered that most martyrs who died in the Bible were actually buried inside the church and around churches. It's only recent planning and health situations that prompted having cemeteries and burial places zone. The other two heritages, Islamic, as we will see later, were influences of Islam in things like harems. I'm sure Muslims here will understand what I mean. In large houses, you have separated places for the women, like you have in Hausa architecture behind the Zauri. The women places are hidden. Then Western heritage architecture, represented by churches and many high-rise buildings and the like that we find there. All these we will find to be subsumed under what we call vernacular architecture. And this is usually the blend of all these three. And they are built forms that belong to a location and expresses the regional dialect and speaks the cultural language of the people, where architecture, like I said earlier on, is seen as the language or form of expressing their culture. Through vernacular architecture, it may have some element of foreignness, just like I've said, which is in all of us. Ideally, I'm meant to be in a suit today. It's a breed of architecture which largely retains some traditional forms. The essence of all this is to bring out sustainability, how sustainable the architecture our fathers' practice in the past have been. This will take me to talk a little bit about sustainability. Sustainability evolved from environmental concerns in response to the industrial revolution's challenges on the ecosystem, resource depletion and pollution of the environment. Sustainable development must be placed on the triple bottom line of environmental protection, social equity, and economic growth. And the fourth one, culture, according to Professor Ade Bamo, the economic and social systems which entails the enhancement of people's living standards must be balanced by the method of resource exploitation that is conservation and maintenance oriented. And that is the basic characteristic of our traditional architecture. Sustainable architecture, therefore, can be defined as the production of healthy, comfortable, energy efficient, flexible, and long-lasting buildings. Sustainable or green architecture are environmentally conscious and they ensure recycling of resources. A sustainable building must be ecocentric, ecotechnical, ecocentric, eco-aesthetic, eco-medical, eco-social, and eco-cultural. As we will see in this table, and we will use quickly to run through some of our sustainable practices. The sustainable building must conserve energy, It must work with climate. New resources must be minimized. The use of new resources must be minimized. That's what causes a lot of climatic change, earthwarming now. Respect for the users, which we will find in a cooperative building and the way our buildings were done. Respect for the site and holism. Traditional architecture and semiotic studies show that there is great sustainability which can be achieved in the use of our traditional building practices and processes. It will be of interest to note that most of our building practices in the past, within the indigenous heritage, which we all have looked down so much of due to the influence of civilization and colonization, could be the redeeming feature in achieving a sustainable built environment for the future generation. The building industry stakeholders, especially the architects, will have the opportunity of reducing the impact of our day-to-day building activities on the environment through the implementation of those 6 objectives in the table. And this is what has prompted the title of the rejected Cornerstone, the indigenous African architecture, which at all times fulfills those 6 sustainable qualities of sustainable architecture. This implies that the architect is a major player and he should make use of readily available natural resources. In order to sustain the future of the African architecture, it's imperative for us to look into our past practices, build form spaces, and see how this rejected stone can be made to be more acceptable. Semiotics. Semiotics is a scientific process derived from linguistics, establishing meaning by the interpretation of signs and symbols. Semiotics is a multisensory, traditional, and comprehensive environmental appreciation method which encompasses aesthetics, science, and systems. Culture is identified as a form of communication which is expressed by architecture as our object of analysis here, and is applied in all those various areas of studies that are listed there. In modern times, in the 60s, there was a rapid development of semiotics as a multidisciplinary method applied in all those areas of life mentioned earlier. But in this present context, semiotics entails seeing architecture as being beyond mere function, but also being symbolic and being of great symbolic and overall significance to society. This will mean, for instance, that the wall is doing more than literally sheltering, supporting and enclosing us. It's however when the function is considered along with the existence of the explicit meaning that it has its practical application. Just like you will see in the subsequent table, the Yoruba will say ogirileti. It means beyond enclosing us. The acoustic quality of the wall. And then again, when Yoruba man says that, it means you must be careful, not being a gossiper, because whatever you say, the wall itself will transmit it for other people to know. Architectural theory of semiotics and its relationship to the Yoruba-speaking people of southwest Nigeria was examined, tried to show that local build form had a design process culture whose meaning we can best understand using semiotic principles. There is that word, oro onile. But what I've discovered is that most of our build forms that has been lost, that we don't appreciate, it is through the use of word. Bí a ṣe máa ń sọ wípé tọ́rọ̀ bá sọnù, òwe la fi ń wá. I'm trying to use words to bring out most of our lost beautiful building traditions. Semiotics is presented as a basis for architectural presentation and appreciation, and it is more comprehensive. Presently, if you talk about architects, we are only known mainly for drawing. But semiotics is saying you can use language, you can use the building is more than the aesthetics, part of which is a part of semiotics. You can feel the building, so many things that semiotics gives you a broader understanding. In semiotic terms, architecture is primarily functional and denoted. That is, the building is meant for us to see. But beyond it, for instance, if you mention the 500-seater in the Lagos State Polytechnic, it means our essential place that gathers all of us together. It has a symbolic and representational meaning. Various fathers of semiotics, Ferdinand de Shaw, had the dyadic theory that just simply divided into two. The signify, that is the concept, what the concept represents, and the form in which it is presented. There's also the popular Semiotic Triangle by Charles Sanders Peirce, an American, where you have the signifiers as the word, spoken word, diagram, drawing, or whatever. And this can be iconic, which you see on things, the buildings you see physically standing and the like. It can also be lexical. For instance, Yoruba will say, "Ajekela no, omo kuloni, tani ko mo pe aje ana lo pa omo." Abi èéfín ló ń fi ìwà hàn. Just the way the building, without necessarily physically, the building directs how you move, where you sit, where you go. That's the lexical form of semiotics. Apart from, like I said, the symbolic representation of what the building stands for. There is also the semantic, the syntactic and pragmatic divisions of semiotics. Beyond the local application, there was an House 6 by Esseman, who also tried greatly to use simple axonometrics and so many things to point at the fact that design and architecture is beyond mere drawings. House 6 used semiotics to show design process, drawing limitation, and this paved way for computational design, though that was not the original idea. Now to the crux of today's lecture, the Yoruba semiotic approach. The social and physical importance of the house to the southwest Yoruba people is so much that everything about us is about Ile. We call the world Ile, Aye, Abi, or what we call heaven, Ajule, Aju, Ile, Orun. Meaning, whatever, how big the world is there only a bigger model of the house. At the smaller level too, when you want to talk about family, you say Idile, that's the extended Yoruba family. Most built environment terms were often so symbolic that without seeing a drawing, you will already have a picture of what is being said. If you simply say Ile Aberewo, Ile Okete, I'm sure it gives you an impression. A house you bend down to enter, maybe like that of a rabbit. But as we will see for the Yorubas again subsequently, in course of my research, in meeting the Yoruba sages, the Babalawos and I'm a reverend, I'm an Anglican reverend. But this research had to take me to meet with those who can help us to find meaning that we had lost. I discovered that for the Yorubas too, that word Ile Aberewo does not mean the house belongs to a poor person. The Englishman in the church is built to be so tall, the man is made to look so small in respect for God. But in Yoruba tradition, the way we build was so that when you get to a shrine, it was purpose designed, as you have to bend down to enter into a shrine, no matter how big you are, to show that you did obeisance. Isn't this comparable to a great extent? And you will say the black man, you don't have anything to offer. The Yoruba word Orile-ede, I think, describes a nation better than the English word. Yes or no?
Yes.
It's equally important. Without wasting our time so much, there is the term called syntagms in semiotics, which is the combination of words to form sentences. The word Abeokuta, I think you can see Abe added to Okuta to become Abeokuta. These are the way Yoruba words are used to bring out meaning. And the challenge in this is for us, different other languages, to equally go and look at our language. I've discovered that the Chinese language, for instance, it looks like drawings. So they may actually be more semiotic. There's so much for us to pick from these buildings that we can no longer see. And the moment we do this, we'll be able to appreciate and understand very much more about our buildings. The issue of architecture and the phenomenon of concepts. The architects, those of us who are architects here will know. We talk about concepts. The idea begins to well from your inside. It becomes sketches before drawings, and you now build it. And like I said earlier on, from that word, akole inu kan o le gbon titi koko atan agbon. The word akole inu doesn't it best describe an architect? The one who first builds his house on his inside before it is welled out into drawings and whatever thing you want to call it. This means certainly Yorubas have been building, and the Yorubas will say ile la n wo ato somo loruko. It means something must have existed before you give it a name. That you are hearing all these words, Yoruba terms, meant we had great building culture in the past, which we have all lost. Next, we will see this table, which I will use briefly to show that the Yorubas were not only special, we had specializations. There are particular proverbs. Ẹ má torí ẹdẹ bẹ̀ẹ̀dẹ̀ jẹ́, nítorí tá a bá kúrò lẹ́dẹ̀ ẹ̀ẹ̀dẹ̀ là ń padà bọ̀. It simply meant there was urbanization in Yoruba land before now. Ede was a Yoruba city. And the way when you come to the city, you lose nuclear concept. You forget about the family, the extended family. So the idea is that don't come to Lagos and forget Ile-Ife, where you are from, the Ede or the Orua. And the beauty of the Ede or Orua is that it's a place where many of us who may remember, my big brother, Mr. Dokwadem, you're most welcome. You remember, probably in our grandfather's houses and the like, you first of all see in the front the influence of Western architecture in the narrow corridor, the sitting room, and probably something. Then you go a little bit down, you see a large space. It's not a corridor. It's always wide. There you will see a koti. There you will see kotomanko adiyesi akahe. There you will see the adiro, the 3 stones. The women sit there, they sleep there, the children are reared there, and the entire family is binded together. You even see up to 3 generations of families living together in the same place, and they don't have any problem. So it shows that we had interior design in our traditional architectural practice. We had the building, and then we had planning, up to regional master planning that we are talking of. Again, I've mentioned Ile Abere Wobili Okete, and I've explained this. And it goes beyond, you may just mistake it to be a house where you bend into. It goes beyond that. It is equated to the big cathedral church, where obeisance to a greater being is ensured. Ile Oba Aye yìí ó dára dúró wò bí ère. I'm sure it gives you an impression that the palace is meant to be a much finer place than any other normal building. But sadly, most palaces, in Ife Palace particularly, the only thing that was found there really relevant is only these porch-shed pavements and a vernacular building called Ilela. And most other palaces, in our palace, it was built according to the Buckingham Palace now.
The only thing they left there is a large courtyard, which is comparable to what you have in South Africa, where within it's so big enough, it's like a marketplace, where all sorts of things go on. Sort of. There is another word, ìwọ ò ní lẹ̀kùn, ẹrú wẹ́wẹ́ ni wọ́n fi ń de ilé bàbá wọn. This shows that even as far back as then, we know that the concept of security was there beyond doors. The Africans, what we had, apart from door, most of our doors were left open, and we had what we call agoranji or ẹran ìjẹ. It was that small baluster thing. It is such that it ensures continuity and relationship. If the neighbor is going by, he will talk, and the person inside will hear and recognize who it is. It is not secluding, unlike this present day, me and my, you understand? If you compare the present day sitting room to what we call the Yoruba, you will see that the sitting room does not ensure inclusivity. It does not bring all of us together, just as you will see in the typical traditional building. Severally, and many other words like Opomulero, Arapasoko, and if I use this word, you will think I'm making incantation. Aderumaso, ni orúkọ tí à ń pè ìwọ òpó. But listen. What picture does this create in your mind? It is the fact that we had columns, and the column is meant to support the building. That's the simple difference. But you would think the African, the demon has come. Is making incantation. But inside these things are intrinsic, rich things that speaks about volumes of so many things. Many of these words you will find in the Ifa corpus. Some of them were traditional before the influence, and you have some of them that, and it, like I said, is now vernacular terms. I've mentioned Iwon Eku ni Iwon Ite. Shows your throne will be as big as you are. It means even the rabbit has his own throne, and the throne of a village chief is different from the throne of a first-class Oba, like the Oni of Ife and several others. Ìgbà èké ní dáwọ́ tilé, ìgbà láàmú ní dáwọ́ ti ògiri. This is telling you, I originally was thinking it's merely columns, but this is talking about formwork. Inside the house, you see so many iron rods. You cannot count them. Igba is 200. So you find several of them that helps to support the house. For the roof, you will say one field, a delori. It's a form of symbolically meaning seal, but it's simply what you call the ridge cap, to avoid rain seeping into the point at which the roofs join one another. I've mentioned Ogirileti. I had to cut this short. If I continue, we will be here the whole day. But what you will discover is that apart from all this, our architecture is such that took care of what we call the 5 P's of sustainability: the planet, the people, partnership, peace and prosperity. We used to build by what we call Oya. We don't need money. It's just a matter of drawing a timetable. The day we are going to build the acting registrar's building, the day we are going to build Mr. Acting Rectors at your house, it's a matter of having it in timetable. We will contribute our labor. And this is a great practice in some other parts of Africa. And that we are losing by becoming me and my, like I said. It is so that it satisfies the environment, social and economic issues and the cultural issues. The proposed framework indicates that resource conservation, cost efficiency and design for human adaptation are things that are found in our traditional buildings. Well, resource conservation can be achieved by accomplishing more. We will see this is the 17-point sustainable development goals of the United Nations. All these things, if you look at them nitty-gritty, they are well satisfied by our traditional, especially, like I said, the indigenous part
of African architecture. Resource conservation can be further achieved by creating opportunities for recycling. If you pull down a bamboo house now with the earth, can't you reuse it immediately again? Just shows the recyclability, the reusability, and it is said to be bulletproof. In the night, the heat it has retained, if it's a cold weather, will be released. And in the afternoon, the coldness it has retained in the night will be released to make the day cool inside the house. You may say it was dark, but they were not writing. They were not sewing. They were not sewing. It was, practically useful and met their purposes. And even if it is just a concept that we can learn from them, it is such that it will help us in moving forward. I had the opportunity of talking with the chairman of the governing council, and when I told him I'm in this, well, he said that's the essence of bringing all of us back. I want to commend one or two people here today, Mr. Frank Ogundano and Mrs. Akikube. If you go to their houses here in Ikorodu, you will agree with me, even if it is in that minimum way. It is built of stabilized earth. They have been there. I think your own house too has been. Well, we are all afraid. You don't want to be, associated with a traditional house. These are things we need to, even if it is the concept, we must at least. These were some of the places. That's a group in Ile-Ife. Most of these things not appreciated. They have been demolished. They have been removed flagrantly. And even for, like I said, it took me to be able to now use what we call the archaeological method, associating with archaeologists, to be able to appreciate this. This is what Aregbesola 2017 called our own road alloy technology. This thing was, according to history, since the 9th century. Most of them were used by the Oni Luo then, a female, in the 9th century, over 1,000 years ago, and they are still there. These are things that I believe, even if it is a mere landscaping today, that we can apply. Like I said, the Owo Palace is virtually gone, but there is the Ojumu Palace. And you will see, those are inside the wall, indents, where things are kept. That's between the roof and the beam, where things are also kept. And as you will see, there is the Aja and the Pepe, and the Yoruba will say, Aja no leru, Ironi Pepe npa. You have the shelf to the wall. You store some things there. But from my research, when we get to the Awotiku house, where we will get to shortly, we will see we have greatly sloping roofs that is large enough that even bicycles are kept in the Aja. The Aja concept is different from the present day ceiling. The wood, it's so strong. You understand what I'm saying now? That you cannot, it's different. It's a lot. It's only in some American designs in Chevron, when I designed some buildings for a particular person, that you still find what you call lock. They still have a second level of decking, and they have all sorts of things inside there. The Ojumu Palace, those are well carved columns in the Benin tradition, and you still see use for storages. And then in Ogbomoso Palace, among other things, you have carved doors that told the entire story from when Ogbori Elemosho started, and that one was corrupted, like I said in syntagm, to become Ogbomosho, Ogbeori Elemosho. And that is what most of our words, if you take time, like I said, Tabadeju, Arimu. So that's what we need to do to be able to appreciate much of our architecture. The Awotiku house. This is a vernacular house, but so rich, by my understanding, that I actually presented it to an international gathering of the Aga Khan and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It may look so simple, but you will see at the front the Western culture. There is a living room and 2 rooms open into it. That was the precursor or the beginning of the present day flats. On the left, to me, you see a shop, still part of the Western architecture thing. You now see the Orua, like I said, place where the family, the mothers, the children all gather, and the unity of the family is ensured. At the back, you have where the women quarters is. There seems to be some similarity between Islamic culture and the African, in the concept of polygamy. You see at the back, the courtyard. And inside the courtyard is where you call the Akodi. Actually, where we come from, Akodi, with development became like the family small common hall, where all the family gather for meetings. But the courtyard, it has a small place where people sit and they still do family meeting. You can see that vast richness. And the Awotiku house too. Let's go to the pictures there. That's the representation of the Aja. You see ropes called Papa that were used to tie and hold things that are stored, farm produces, and things you don't want little children. And usually have a way of climbing up whenever they want to have these things and bring them down. Well, that particular pyramidal roof is, you see the columns or caryatids, and in Yoruba land you see these caryatids, you see all sorts of carvings telling stories of the society. This was equal. If you go to the present day Oyo Palace, this was still adopted and used, so much so. Still in regard to roofs, as we will see in the appendix, in Osun Osogbo group, the roofs were actually made to look like beds. And the idea, according to Susan Wenger, was to represent actually the yas. If you look at the roof, it's like a flying roof. You understand? But all we are just saying is that things we do in this part of the world are so symbolic and meaningful that we must not just throw them away. In vernacular architecture too, as we will see, that's the cuckoo house. It's about the first. It was built in the early 18th century, in the late 18th century. There, you see Islamic influences. Those bungalows are the harems, where the women live. And the story building, which is called Petesi, we have the first story building. You know, that was when the Western influence came. But you still see the concept of the Oruwa and the like inside the main house. And in the Kuku house, as we will see in the appendices again, you see all the religions. There are Muslims in the Kuku family. There are Christians. They have a small place where they bury all their people. And they're all there. You see the Christian insignia, the Islamic insignia. But you see unity, which is what our architecture preaches. Some other materials and methods were used in finishes. Many of us will know when they say one gole, you use edu, that's charcoal, and some other things, and you paint our floor, just like you have with tiles, up to the window sill. In Badagry area, palm kernels were used, and wherever you have such oil mill industries, there is need for us to look within and see the abandoned practices to achieve sustainability. And just like I said, we had the cooperative oil building. And that is why the Ife man will say, Omode nishe, Agba nishe, Nofidale Efe. When you are building cooperatively, everybody, the women will be cooking, the children will be singing, the fathers, you know, different specialties will come in. And the house comes out beautifully, everybody enjoys, and the unity of purpose is maintained. I also learned that beyond what you call SL bata, the traditional way I know you measure is SL bata, abi SL bata mefa. But as that picture will show you, I was with some sages, some elderly traditional builders, and they said the Yorubas traditionally they will look for a very tall person and do like this. And that's why you have our rooms. They were not really living in the rooms. The rooms was meant to be where you will have the idol, the Orisha thing. They just store things there. They live, like I said, in the Ode or the Orua. You understand? So you had the rooms needing be more than the 9 feet, 2.7, and it's so dark from purpose. You know, whatever they wanted to do all day was done in the Orua. This is what we call traditional anthropometrics that you only find in the likes of architects' data and the like. And the Yoruba man, the Yoruba will come and say, we are foolish people. Traditional buildings in the past considered the use of natural lighting, ventilation, and means of establishing natural thermal comfort. Unlike most of our present day buildings, without AC, can we be comfortable here?
No.
Such presence of the Oruwa and Ode have explained the place that gathers everybody together. They were well thought out, planned, and usually our fathers made use of available materials. These other elements and features of the architecture of the study area equally promote sustainability. The building is protected from a range of humidity. The floors were raised up. The rooms were protected from the rain with the very high weaves that hangs out. They were usually built of materials with minimum thermal capacity. They were decentralized and scattered. And you have what we call the Agbo Ile band of houses, which makes a set of, whether by blood or whatever, familiar people who have decided to live together and protect one another. Several other features, mostly now of vernacular, because like I said, save those words. Most of those vernacular aspects of architecture are nowhere to be found, especially in Lagos. Almost 20 years ago, when I used to do some work in Ipaja, you still find some dots of them, but I've been going through Ipaja and those semi-local, you hardly can find any of such things any longer. And that is the way we throw away the baby and with the bad water. So many good things about us. The Yoruba man says, the Yoruba man never believe I should be a reverend. They believe I must end up as a catechist. It's the same in Islam, sir. But it is us, still trusting and believing in God, we must promote and project and sustain what is ours. What I've mentioned about the improving courtyard, as you will see, the sloping roof, all those are things stored underneath the roof. That's column, always beautifully designed. The next, the houses are well raised, and this particular building is only you may not be able to see. There is a throne. It belonged to a chief in Igbara, Odo Ekiti. There is a particular throne seat there where the father sits in judgment and does all sorts of things. Inside the house was his mausoleum. There is a courtyard inside the house and several other things like that. We have, from the foregoing, national and vernacular built form that purposely imbibe the indigenous heritage of African architecture can be seen as being most sustainable. And of these three heritages, it is sadly the most endangered, and it is therefore the rejected cornerstone. The currently built environment stakeholders will generally abandon them because of the influence of Western education. This opinion is fundamentally aged. The opinion of and the idea of the cornerstone in Psalm 118, verse 22 of the Holy Bible. The stone which the builders refused has become the headstone of the corner. It is imperative, therefore, to ask each and every one of us here today whether or not it is also possible that our built environment practices and culture processes that our fathers used and succeeded, but that we, as current practitioners of architecture, engineering, and construction, have refused to use. From the little I've done today, I believe we can see that it will become the future cornerstone for a sustainable environment. In my stay here, architectural education and polytechnic, I discovered way back since my BSc days, I had a classmate who went to the polytechnic. I discovered that his practical experience was far better than mine, who was in the University of Ife. So I delight in being a polytechnic lecturer who have produced all sorts of students. And the architectural education itself started from apprenticeship until it becomes something you come to school to learn. And that was exactly what happened to the likes of the first Nigerian architect, late Papa Onofok, and the first Nigerian planner. They went to polytechnics. But these days, even in my institute, we sadly separate, we call Great, great Laspocians. And the greatest Laspocians. You are great. You are great. Very, very great. Since my resumption here as a lecturer, since 1999, like was said, my calling has been that of building the ruined cities. I've been able to have students, I've been able to be student-centered in my approaches to different categories of students who have turned out to be greatly successful. And we have reports from the universities they went to and places where they were. Some of them are back here with us as lecturers, and they are bridging the generation gap between us. And in our department, in 2013, we started a CAD teaching architecture in computer. I had the opportunity of starting that too, and it has really helped us in being very competitive in the market. But what we are saying is that anybody can do CAD now. We have so many AutoCAD technicians. What makes the difference is your understanding, like I said, as an akole, you know, when you are able to appreciate your environment, whatever you do is to enhance the environment and not to further pull it down. Collaborations. There is an ongoing collaboration with the Yoruba Studies Association of Nigeria. I really wish I'd studied Yoruba to some extent. I'm looking forward to the day where I can teach architecture in Yoruba as much as possible. As a member of the International Network for Building and Architecture and Urbanism, we were able to really criticize how many of the beautiful outside buildings was pulled down because they wanted to construct a road. That is the sad trend all over Nigeria. I have had the opportunity of being having some studies in interior design, as well as being a trained teacher, and I went to the College of Theology, and I also made it relevant to my architecture in my thesis project, the relevance of specification writing to modern day churches. A recent presentation of the award equals, like I've said, to the A3 ACNET group, the Aga Khan Foundation, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Our opportunities I've had in trying to promote this, so I look forward to greater opportunities by the grace of God. In conclusion, African architecture, especially the indigenous, is and remains the veritable tool for the enrichment of architecture generally. However, the path of promoting this has been very rough and remains so because of lack of support from stakeholders. So I'm asking for support from all of you here, like an advocate of what is truly and genuinely ours. We can also conclude that Yoruba common statements or ways, or whatever you want to call them, create picture of realities that encourage sustainable built environment more than the best 3D drawings can do. Our words are so balanced too. There's that word, it's not just talking about the positive things too. It still describes, it's total and holistic, sort of. The demonization and the brainwashing to believe that everything about us is bad makes us condemn and abandon some beauties in our indigenous built environment. Our indigenous African architecture is something the future can be built upon. If we patiently, like I said earlier, Tabadeju, Arimu, so that our indigenous built environment best practices can be at least placed on equal pedestal with the Islamic and Western influences. If this is done appropriately, then in practice and beyond mere semantics, which is part of semiotics, the aims of appreciating African architecture can be made into cultural tourism for economic gain. Finally, I want to tell all of us here that you are all living stones, and you are built up for a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. Wherefore, also it is contained in the scriptures, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect and precious, and that he that believeth on him shall not be confounded. And in the last verse, it says, which in times, that is you and me, and African and vernacular, or rather the indigenous aspect of our architecture, we are not a people, but now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but which now have obtained mercy. I want to thank Jesus Christ, my cornerstone, who is my all, and the inspiration of this lecture today. Recommendations. There is need to look inwards to be able to appreciate the rich potentials of Yoruba African architecture. It is necessary to unlearn and remove the wrong notions and the loss of belief in ourselves in demonizing our indigenous heritages. We should resuscitate the Yoruba indigenous architecture that they developed to the point of perfection and exhaustion before declining to eventual decay and extinction before the slave trade. In the early 20th century, London was in, there's no time for this, it was no light, muddy, poddy, and way before then, we had our own portrait pavement. In the 9th century, we need to go back and do the needful. Our traditional architecture should be fashioned with available materials to meet the needs of the people, promoting social inclusion as well as suiting the environmental conditions to harmoniously reverse the present dominance of external influences. Many of us will remember in the early 70s, when because of high cost of cement, they burned bricks. But this one was now machine produced. I know so many thousands that my brother purchased to build his house in Ife. Out of about almost in every state you had such industries, only 2 remain now. So what we are saying is that we don't need big machines. I want us, like Professor Biden just told us, technology that we can handle, things that we have around us that we neglect. Let us begin to look at them and see the great things in them. I'm saying again, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, we must go back to appreciating the unique balance and openness, yet close, unifying, inclusive characteristics of African architecture. There should be an opportunity to set up guilds to teach our younger ones of the great ways to work art and green approach to environmental development and inclusive cooperative and apprenticeship in our traditional buildings. Mr. Rector, sir, in acknowledging my dedication and foremost acknowledgement to God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who is able to keep us from falling and present us faultless before God in His glory. Many thanks go to the great but mostly unappreciated African practitioners in art and build forms, whose work and good practices have inspired the need to grasp and study a meaning in African cultural spaces and build forms, like the Bishop Ajayi Crowther. He was like Tyndale. He was so persecuted by the white men. And that is what prompted the proliferation of the many African churches. Oyinbos don't believe, prof, sir, they don't believe you should become a professor. But thank God that we see that even in the present solution to the COVID-19 vaccine, a Nigerian is said to be among them. The Lord has endowed us with so many things that we should do. The likes of Olubadan Oba Di Akinyele, the late Ooni of Ife Sir Adesoji Aderemi, Fela Anikulapo Kuti, Susan Wenja, Ulibia. These are people who actually refused to be unduly assimilated by globalization, and they went ahead to promote Afrocentricity. I wish to express my appreciation to all my lecturers at the University of Ife, both from the University of Trinity, as are listed there, and some of my senior colleagues in the likes of Professor Arayela Sashono. Some of them, I don't know if they are here, some of them were meant to be here. I acknowledge the presence of my classmates in secondary school, St. John's Grammar School, who are here. My focus on using semiotics for interpreting architecture was polished by the octogenarian Doyen Nigerian Professor of Architecture, Papa Professor E.A. Adeyemi, who would have loved to be here, and my co-supervisor, Dr. I.C.S. Zema, others like Professor Ibem, Dr. Alagbe, as listed there, all in the Department of Architecture in the College of Science of the Covenant University, Ota. Special thanks go to all these professors and mentors and friends at the University of Lagos who at one time or the other made it possible for me in compiling and in bringing all these ideas together. The former past president of the Nigerian Institute of Architects, many of them would have been here, but as we speak, the annual conference, the annual convention of architects is going on in Benue State. They all were there in helping to give basis to this. I want to thank Mr. Patrick Omote, Lanre Azan, and the family. I thank you. Mr. Ademola Adedini, Mrs. Anako, and my young daughter who schooled in Unilag, Olutola Kolawole, who made compiling all these things easy for me. My former supervisor in the School of Theology too, Venerable Dr. Fatile, who actually instructed me to go back and do my doctoral in architecture. The executive management, deans, directors, heads of departments, and every member of the Polytechnic of Excellence. I thank you all. Thank you for creating for me a conducive environment for academic livelihood and supporting this endeavor. Despite sometimes we fail to measure up to expectations. Once more, thank you. I appreciate friends and mentors, saints, triumphants who have contributed in one way or the other along my path today. The late Kunle Ambala Adeyemo, my brother and cousin, Architect Tunde Onojobi, Bode Shomuyiwa, and Mr. Shomuyiwa. I thank my spiritual mentor and family, the immediate past Archbishop and Most Reverend Professor A.D. Akinde, and the present Bishop, Right Reverend B.C. Akinkwelu Johnson of the Lagos Mainland Anglican Diocese, among other clergy and lay members, all of who and the parishes where we have served. The past and new Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Ife, Bishop Olunoti Odudogun and Bishop Yinka Kinlade, to my missionary friends, Stan Ngozi, Mrs. Esther Olowu, Samiri Ofong, and the very many of them, as I've mentioned. To the clergy and members of the Chapel of the Healing Cross who are here, I want to thank you for giving me a conducive spiritual environment to survive and be able to still do my work. To my large, that includes the immediate past Chief Resident Minister, Venerable and Architect Tunde Osho, who was once the head of the Department of Architecture here too, and the present Chief Resident Minister, Very Reverend Olorun Madi. I thank you all. To my large royal clan of Ile-Ife, the Adeyemos, the Adewis, the Aderemis, and the Omishoris, my paternal, and then the Makindes, maternal family. You are so many, yet so loving. And among you, everybody is somebody. My one of a kind parents, the late Papa Prince Adegoke and Deborah Adeyemo, and all my siblings, Brother Dokun, Sister Nike, Dewale, Sister Laide, and the very many other people in the large family that you represent. To the great Shomuyiwa family of Abeokuta, I thank you for giving me the love of my life. I also want to thank the Inaugural and Public Lecture Committee led by Dr. Arowolo and the Exhibition Committee, which I chair, for having an exhibition outside there for us. Finally, I acknowledge the great support of the extended and immediate families, especially my loving spouse, barrister, now turned crèche teacher. She has preferred to be taking care of little children and taking good care of me too, sometimes like a baby. Mrs. Eniola Adeyemo, I thank you, and my children who are unavoidably absent here because of their different pursuits in life. Finally, Mr. Acting Rector and every other person here, I thank you again for the opportunity of presenting this lecture. I thank you all, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, students, friends, colleagues, gentlemen of the press, for honoring me with your presence and continued rapt attention throughout this lecture. I accept every responsibility for whatever might be errors in this. And the whole essence of this is to present it and see how other people can be can be helped to also promote the building cultures in their different places where they come from. May God bless and keep us all. I wish you all well, safe journeys as we thank God, and by the grace of God, the affliction of COVID-19 will not arise again for us in Nigeria in Jesus' name. Thank you all.
Lecturer, you can have your silver. We honor you. Lecturer, thank you. Please, more for him. Thank you all. Thank you all. We also take our seats. Thank you. The Akolenu has finally paid his academic debt. Another round of applause for him. While the lecture was on too, we had one of us, also a very notable Nigerian, a former registrar of this institution, a former federal INEC commissioner that represents us all from here, is Mr. Moshood Oluwole Ojikutu. You are welcome, sir. That's the man there. If you don't, a former federal INEC commissioner. Thank you, sir. Now, not to take much of our time, there won't be question and answer. This is an inaugural lecture. Remarks. I want to start with the acting rector. Remarks. Few minutes. Tell us who you are and talk about the lecture briefly. No question and answer. Let's start from you, Mr. Rector.
Thank you very much.
Already, sir.
Thank you very much. Honestly, I have no regret for sustaining the approval that was given by the former rector for him to make this presentation. I call him my semiotic friend because I did a little bit of semiotic also in my profession and very, very interesting. So when he was putting up this paper, actually engaging each other, and I have learned a lot from him. And from the presentation you have made today, honestly, it's very historic, very informative, and it's an excellent presentation. Mine will not be a remark or something to lighten you up. You did say in your presentation that Ferdinand Saussure theorized this synchronatic approach. That language should not only be looked at in its historical context, but also how it relates to specific moments. Now, I recall some years back when I was listening to a television program, Professor Sophia Oluwole at the University of Lagos was trying to compare two issues. And that's why I said I'm going to use it to lighten up. He said, can we listen to this? Òjò rọ̀ ṣeré nú ilé, má wọnú òjò kí aṣọ rẹ má bàa tútù, kí òtútù má bàa mú ẹ. Take that on one hand. Take that on one hand. He now said on the other hand, which one is more informative, which one is more educative? Because most times we don't document what we have. We know them away. Rain, rain, go away, go and come another day. Little Johnny want to play. Why will rain not come another day? Which one is more educative?
Yoruba.
Òjò rọ̀ ṣeré núlé, má wọnú òjò kí aṣọ rẹ má bàa tútù, kí òtútù má bàa mú ẹ. Once again, my brother, congratulations.
Honestly, African is rich. We are very rich. Let's keep it. Remarks before we close. Dr. Taiwo.
Coach.
Dr. Bolero, please.
Definitely, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Joseph Bamide Laniwa. I want to thank the guest lecturer, the inaugural lecturer, for a very stimulating talk. And I'm so impressed by the richness of the Yorubas. I'm not surprised it's from the cradle of civilization. I'm so impressed. This could have been another Yoruba inaugural lecture. So rich. But something I discovered now, which is happening in my father's house. I think my father has the first story building in our street. And it was painted everywhere, was circular, everybody wants to be there. And everywhere we have this gramophone, everybody wants to be there during the Christmas. But I realized there's something happening now. A lot of people, because they're now getting rich, they are breaking our house down, which I believe is a very sad thing. That is something that forever you should cherish. Even if we want to modernize it, have something there. But, and I think the local electors would have mentioned something like that. It's not a good idea to be breaking somebody's house. There's nothing like rich culture of Nigeria. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bisi Olaoye is my name. I'm a minister of the gospel. I want to thank God for this wonderful privilege to be here today. Architect Jibade Adeyemo, my good friend, we have been together for the past 48 years. And it's been a wonderful person. Since we were younger, I knew that God had a purpose for his life. And I thank God that one way or the other, we came together to become ministers of the gospel, despite our different professions and communications. I listened very patiently to this, and I must confess that I'm not, surprised at all with the quality of research and presentation that we have seen today. One thing that struck me most is the depth of the Yoruba culture that is infused in architecture, and we have lost a lot of things, which our brother has tried to recapture, to reposition us for the future. I see this lecture as a bridge between the old, the ancient, and the modern. And I believe that our policy formulators really need to go back to the drawing board to work on this paper, this lecture, and use it in the repositioning of architecture in the African sense, in which we will be able to get something that is more cost effective. To build houses today is very, very expensive. So if we take cognizance of what our brother has put together here, it will be easier for the younger generation to build their houses. Our architect, Dr. Jibade Adeyemo, may the Lord continue to bless you. In Jesus' name.
The last remark. Mr. Shetu. Okay.
I use this opportunity to congratulate Lagos State Polytechnic organizing this lecture. I'm Joel Olatoke. I'm an associate member, Chartered Store Bankers. I'm a chairman of Cooperative Society. And in our effort to build house for our people, we acquire some acres of land. But the challenge we have is to build a house or prototype that will commensurate with the income of our people, because we are dealing with low income earners. But when we call on the architect and so on, I say, what a month is needed for 3-bedroom flat. They now say 20 million naira. I say, oh, can't you go inward and think of a local material? Please, I want to throw this channel to Lagos people. If you can design an estate, we can see the quick into why using local material and give us the cost, then we will enjoy it. Because what we are having is this all this foreign material that are not even durable. And from the compound, that in our compound we use local material and it's not as costly as what we are having here. So I use this opportunity to congratulate our able speaker in delving into this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I want to call on Dr. Surajuddin Aminu for the vote of thanks. I stand on existing established protocol. On behalf of my chairman, Dr. Arulo, the chairman of LASPOTEC Public and Inaugural Lecture Committee, I want to appreciate those of you who have graced this occasion and made it a huge success. I start with the chairman of the Governing Council, the one and only one, Professor Kola Odikutu, for gracing this occasion. We appreciate your support since your council was inaugurated. Thank you very much. Mrs. Sheyi Ogundele, one-time Dean, School of Environmental Studies, and former Deputy Director of this great institution. We also say a big thank you for gracing this occasion. Professor Badejo, you were here just a week ago as a guest lecturer in our public lecture. We all listened to you as you took us through the various ways the knotty problems that are associated with Lagos transportation could be resolved. We all listen to you. You are here today as a guest to listen to one of our own. And I'm sure you also have a nice time. You enjoyed it the way we enjoyed your lecture. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you. I also want to extend our appreciation to Mrs. Lydia Olonfemi, sisters of the lecturer. We thank you for coming around. Mrs. Adenike Adefioye, thank you for coming. May God bless you. Mrs. Tayo Udo, we appreciate you. Your time and every other resource you have invested. Dr. Architect Kunle Ogunaike, Chief Lecturer in Yaba College of Technology, who is here on sabbatical, we also appreciate you for leaving your task schedule to be here with us today. Thank you. May God bless you. Mrs. Dokun Adeyemo, Mr. Dokun Adeyemo, I'm sure you are a brother to our lecturer. Your investment in your brother, you can see, has yielded a good fruit. So we are proud of you. Thank you for coming around. Also, Mr. Dewale Adeyemo, again, brother to our lecturer. Thank you for coming around. Then Nike Oshijola, we also appreciate your time. Thank you for coming. Pastor BC Olaoye, we thank you for coming around. May God bless you. Then Mr. Festus Agbola, we also appreciate your presence. It is worthwhile. Then I also want to appreciate Mr. Joel Olatoke, Chairman, the Royal Finance and Management Consultant. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you. Then Pastor Godwin Samuel, thank you for your time. We appreciate you. I also want to appreciate Victorious Saint. We appreciate you. And Apostle Olaoye BC, if you are here, we appreciate your presence. Then we also appreciate the presence of Adeju Yikon Isaac. Thank you for coming, for gracing this unique occasion. And the last but not the least, Mr. Peter Aguazi. Thank you. All the students, great last students, my colleagues who are here, all members of academic board, all members of management, we appreciate you for coming. Acting Rector did a lot for supporting this committee. After the initial budget that was approved by Mr. Soburu as far back as November last year, I think we had a reason to come up with an additional supplementary budget, which was submitted just yesterday, and the money was approved. We thank you. Thank you all. We wish you blessed journey to your respective places. Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Aminu. Before we finally close, the acting rector has requested me to inform the community that the inauguration of the new rector will take place in this hall on Tuesday, 1st December 2020. You are all invited. Also, of note, our congregational election will now take place on Monday, 30th November. The Polytechnic anthem.
Excellence is not protect.
Thank you. Let's remain where we are. The rector and the chairman of the Governing Council will lay the inaugural lecturer outside. Let's know where we are, please. Just for the honor. Please, journalists, you can speak with them outside. The chairman of council to join the procession now. Professor Badejo, please join. Mrs.